Super Mario RPG was always one of my favorite games, and, well, it still is, even after what happened. The fateful night when my view of the game would change forever. One night, I got tired of playing the games I'd been working on lately, the usual Minecraft, TF2, and that kind of stuff. I wanted something older, and I thought, well, what better to go back to than my old favorite, Mario RPG. In fact, I'd even been neglecting my webcomic of it lately. I decided to play a little bit, and it would get me in the mood to work on a new comic, get me inspired a bit. I dug out my SNES and my box of games and I hooked it up. Normally I just used an emulator, but I wanted to feel the controller in my hands. The WASD keyboard configuration was just getting tired to me. Anyway, I got it hooked up and I looked through my games. Super Mario All-Stars, Super Metroid, Mario World, Chrono Trigger. Super Mario RPG, The Legend of the Seven Stars. Found it. But when I picked it up, something was kinda off. The cartridge was hot. I mean, really hot. It had never done this before and there was no real explanation for it, since I hadn't used it in months. And even though I should have been more concerned with why it was hot, I still wanted to play it. So I put it in the system anyway, hoping that it wouldn't melt the system, and turned it on. Right away I noticed something else that was really unusual. Right after the Nintendo Square licensing bit, there is usually a cutscene of Toadstool getting kidnapped by Bowser, and Mario opening his door, seeing her missing, and jumps out to save the day. This time, however, it was totally different. Toadstool was sitting on the ground in the same flower patch, but she was crying. Where the usual happy music plays, there was only a crying sound effect, a sound I'd never even heard in the game before. And Bowser never showed up, she just continued to cry. Soon Mario came out of his house and sat beside her looking sad and put his arm around her. He wasn't crying though. I didn't know what happened, but they obviously lost someone very close. The camera panned up to the sky and faded to white. The screen faded back into Mario in his house doing various things, washing his face in the sink and looking over at the second sink and sighing. Sitting at the breakfast table with a place set for a second person across from him. He stared at the empty seat for a bit, before breaking down. At this point I knew who it was that they had lost. It was Luigi. Mario was getting ready to go out, and went for his hammer on the wall, and paused when he saw the one next to it, under the name Luigi. He looked like he was going to well up again, but instead he grabbed his hammer, pulled down his hat, and left. The cutscene cut back to Toadstool in her bedroom in the castle. She sat down on the bed and sighed, brushing her hair and looking out the window. And the screen faded to the title screen. Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Screams. Obviously, something was wrong. I'd never seen any of these sprites in the game, and because of making a comic, I'd seen every one, even the hidden unused sprites. 7 Screams? I wanted to shut the game off because something was very wrong with the cartridge, but I was intrigued. I wanted to know more. I wanted to know what Mario was going to do next, and why Luigi was dead, or who or what was responsible. Something in me told me that I had to hit start. The file select screen was the same, only the Mario sprite you used to select your file didn't have the same old dumpy smile he always had. He looked pretty pissed, to be honest, and there was only one file. All my files were wiped, and I got pretty far on all of them, 2 of which had completed games on them. The file that remained was called Payback. I selected the file and Mario jumped off the screen like he usually does. The game faded in with Mario outside his house, and he actually had dialogue. Mario never speaks in the game, not a single line, but he was speaking, and it wasn't pretty. I could move my character now. The sign above Mario's door that once said Pipe House now said Mario and Luigi, with Luigi's name crossed out. I went inside the house out of curiosity. Everything was different because there was 2 of everything. There were 2 beds, each with a nightstand and a lamp. Mario's was the one with a green blanket and Luigi's was the red one. It was nice they made some contrast there. I knew that was the case because I tried to turn off Luigi's lamp and it would say Luigi wouldn't want me sleeping in his bed. I've got business to resolve anyway. I left the house and went for the Overworld map. There wasn't much to it though. There were huge chunks that looked like they were blown apart by an explosion of some sort. Mushroom Way, however, was intact. I selected Mushroom Way and went in. Everything looked totally different. The dense forest and vines looked like they had been burnt away, and there were charred enemies on the ground. Some with mangled faces, some torn in half, with actual pixelated blood, which was, of course, never seen in a Mario game. I got through the first screen, and the second screen wasn't much better. The hills were flattened. The once spinning flowers were now just piles of ash. Once again, there were enemies all over the ground. The full heal block was still there, even though I didn't have much use for it now. I hadn't thought until now to check Mario's stats. I opened the menu and went into the status and selected Mario. Mario had 20 health out of 20, and already had his hammer, which I didn't think was weird, considering everything else. His other stats were normal too, except one. His attack, defense, magic defense were all normal, but there was a new one, Rage, and it was in red lettering. That made me look at Mario's sprite again, and he still looked pissed. I closed out and continued to play. At the end of Mushroom Way there was a boss, but he wasn't alive. There was a skeleton of the Hammer Brother that was once blocking the way. Burnt flesh still fused to his bones. I inspected the skeleton, and Mario stepped close, put his hand on in for a second, stepped back, and smashed it to pieces with the hammer. I was so shocked to see what I was seeing, but it was making for a pretty interesting story. There was no way I could stop playing. I continued on to Mushroom Kingdom, but didn't get much better from there. Mushroom Kingdom 2 was in ruins. Walls to houses were crumbled, toads were wandering around looking sick, some injured. The place looked like Hiroshima after the A-bomb, and there was no music. Faint wailing could be heard in the background. I tried to talk to one of the people since this was the first NPC that I could interact with so far. He didn't say anything but ellipses. I tried another. She said, At this point I was crying. I couldn't take what I was seeing. I had to stop and come back later. I went down to the inn to see if the save block was there, and it wasn't. Come to think of it, none of the save blocks had been there. The one by Mario's pad, if I recalled correctly, there was supposed to be one on Mushroom Way. I think it wants me to play until the end. No breaks. I paused it, and took a break anyway. During that time I thought about what the game was doing. What was this new story going to tell me? What happened to the Mushroom Kingdom? Did Luigi die in one of these attacks? I guess I'd have to find out when I played again. I got back to the game again. I usually turned my TV off when I had the game paused so my dad wouldn't get after me about leaving stuff unattended. I turned the TV on, and there was a message on my screen. Yeah, I was freaking out after that. I had to catch my breath, but I bypassed the message and unpaused the game and started again. The first place I wanted to go was the item shop to see what kind of items the new game had. But I got down there and the front door to the shop was boarded shut, and there was a note on the door. I read the note and it said, I half expected that. I mean, the old shop owner was a coward anyway. I see the people's personalities haven't been altered at all. The only real change I've seen so far is Mario. Not really a lot I can do now, except go up to the castle and see the princess. And when I got there, I was glad to see the castle didn't get too much damage like the rest of the town. The 2 guards that would usually stand outside the doors were gone. I guess with this assumed thinned numbers, they were needed elsewhere. Once inside, I was spotted by a toad, and immediately scolded for not being there sooner. I moved forward to the main hall, where the Chancellor usually is. The room was a wreck. The red carpet was all ripped up. Curtains torn off the broken windows, holes in the floor, even dead toads were still laying in places. Everyone still alive leapt up to their positions when I walked inside. He inched closer to Mario, and Mario took a step back, and another step back before he... Fuck. He swung his hammer at him, hit him with all his might. Even with the sprite so small and pixelated, I could tell what had happened. He'd broken the Chancellor's neck. A small amount of blood came from his mouth, which took the most damage. The impact happened in slow motion almost. The other Toads just watched in horror as their used-to-be hero just killed their leader in cold blood. Everyone started crying and Mario turned and left the room. The game was taking a really depressing tone, even more so than it had already been. In the next room, Toadstool was waiting for him. Toadstool tried to respond one last time, before there was a rumbling. Like with the sword, Exor came down and shook Bowser's keep. But it came from the next room over. Mario and Toadstool went into the main hall, and there above the Chancellor's body was one of the grossest sci-fi aliens I'd ever seen. It was black and had long spidery legs and a giant head. It was one of the most well-done sprites I'd seen for the game. As in, pretty high pixel count compared to the rest. It immediately started a battle. First one I'd had since I'd started. It was the regular boss music. I was happy to finally hear some familiar music for once. I got my A, B, X, Y options and was ready to attack. I tried X to get a jump attack since some enemies have different weaknesses. I figured I'd test it out. I jumped. I never did get rusty on the timing because I got it exactly perfect. Except, it did no damage. Now it was his turn to attack. With what just happened I knew what to expect. It jumped on Mario and mauled him to death, dealing out 20 damage. My max HP. I was killed in one hit, and the music slowed down to a halt as it does when all your party members die. The battle was over in one turn. I thought it must be a story event, and it turned out it was. I got out of the battle and the alien was standing over Mario. He picked him up with his mouth and swallowed him whole. Toadstool and everyone else could only watch in horror as the screen faded to black. The look of utter shock on my face was unimaginable. Why would someone do this? Who would think up such a weird, horrible ending to a Mario game? It faded black in Toadstool and all the remaining Toads in Nimbus Land, which I'm assuming was the only safe place left, holding a memorial service for Mario. The credits began to roll with no sound at all, just silence with people in the background crying their eyes out, and a wreath with Mario's picture on it. I kept it on for the whole credits just in case there was some post-credit story, and I was right to keep that in mind. The thing I was expecting at least. It was Luigi. He poked his head in the shot, with an evil smirk on his face. He giggled loud in my speakers and the screen just cut to black. I kept it on longer to see if anything else would happen, but nothing did. I turned off the game and turned it back on, but it was gone. The game was back to normal. My save files were back, Mario was happy. I started a file. I was continuing at Smithy's factory. I looked at everyone's stats. There was no rage. It was as if none of this madness ever happened. And, in a way I was glad. In a way I wanted to see how the story would have gone if... well, it's too late to think about it now because it hasn't done it since. I don't know what my system was trying to tell me, but sure is scary as hell to think about.